Okay. So I'm going to give a brief presentation with slides and everything, but I don't want to put myself out as an expert about this. It's just that I gave this presentation recently for a New England Yearly Meeting discussion on fellowship, and it seemed very appropriate to this, so I'm kind of repurposing it. And I think there may be some things in here that meet some of the needs that people have already voiced, but I also think that the conversation might be a great way to do that, the conversation that'll follow. So here we go. Let me share my screen. Okay, you should be able to see a slide that says intentional fellowship.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
So I want to start out by asking a question, what is fellowship? I think that we all have an idea in our heads about what is fellowship, but I like to think about these kinds of things abstractly before concretely, and so I wanted to put it into sort of a perspective. We have some characters in our cast, and I'm going to introduce them. We have meeting for worship, we have clearness committees, meeting committees, we have meeting for business, we have faithfulness groups, we have lots of different kinds of groups, home groups, care and accountability groups. The list goes on and on. And in some sense, fellowship is all the space in between and among these things. It's not necessarily separate from them, but there is generally a feeling that when we're in meeting for worship, that itself isn't fellowship. Meeting for business itself isn't fellowship, but then it is sort of around the edges. So I'm trying to get the idea that it's among and between the spaces here. And I want to now take our cast of characters and put them on this graph. This is like a two-dimensional graph. And from left to right, these things have, over on the left, fewer specific expectations, and over on the right, more specific expectations. And down at the bottom of the graph, they're more serendipitous, which is to say, things happen that we don't expect, and they're wonderful. And up at the top, we have more specific goals. So if I can just sort of place our friends onto this graph, like meeting for business is the thing that has really specific expectations and really specific goals. And so I've put it in the upper right of this graph. Meeting committees, clearness committees, these smaller group activities sort of fall in the middle. They tend to have some specific expectations, but more opportunities for things, for surprises. And they tend to have more opportunities to be unstructured and serendipitous, but with usually some specific goals. And I should add that this is just where I put these things on the graph. Everybody may have different places of putting them, and that's part of the fun here. And then meeting for worship is kind of like heading more in the lower corner. And then I think of fellowship as kind of like all the way down and to the left. It's got the fewest expectations and the most opportunity for serendipity. Now, here's the rub. Zoom was designed for this upper right corner, and it works really well in situations that are very structured with very specific expectations and very specific goals. And, its roots are in like business teleconference meetings. That's where it started. And we're using it for something it was never designed for. And it's a little more appropriate for what we're using it for now than it was when we started back last March or last April, but it still really falls short. And so the question is, what about this other space that so many of our activities live in? And the way I like to think of it is that there's like this wind blowing, and the wind is always blowing these things into the upper right corner. So it's making our activities try to be more structured. And that isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it's an artifact of the way that Zoom was designed. It's an artifact of the ways which the things we do are or are not like the things that Zoom was designed for. And so another way to look at the rest of the picture is that it's the zone of creativity. We don't have to be super creative to do the things that fit into the upper right corner of this graph, although a lot of creativity has been put into thinking about how to do these things, and it's great. But it's the rest of the picture, it's this sort of lavender section here, where creativity is not just helpful, but it's really essential. It's really, really important. It's the zone where we have to think about and be really intentional about how to get these serendipitous things like fellowship. I'm going to skip this graph here because it's not as interesting. So here are some queries that I'm going to just offer, and then maybe give you a couple of case studies about how a couple of different meetings in New England have or haven't engaged with these. What is the why behind fellowship in your meeting? And what is the container that we create for worship, and how does it change if we move out of worship? And what is caring for fellowship about when you don't have coffee and tea to make? Or another question is, what is your fellowship committee doing right now in your meeting? Do you still have a fellowship committee? How are they feeling? Are they feeling challenged, excited, burnt out, frustrated, tired, exhausted, confused? So many possibilities. So I want to talk a little bit about Hanover Friends Meeting, which is a meeting I've attended a few times recently, because I've noticed that the experience of moving from worship into fellowship at Hanover Meeting works well. And I've spoken with some of the folks, you can see their names at the lower right corner of the slide, at Hanover Meeting to kind of get their perspective on it. The most important aspect of what works at Hanover Meeting, I've noticed, is that the worship in Zoom transitions into fellowship in an extremely slow and gradual and graceful process. So it's almost like if you think of us as being in worship with kind of a blanket over us that we have to lift up in order to speak. It's kind of a heavy blanket, at least until the first message comes, and then maybe it feels a little lighter after that. And then you could imagine that at the end of the meeting, we just throw off the blanket and everything bursts into excitement. And sometimes it does feel like that in some meetings, but it doesn't feel like that at Hanover. It feels like the blanket just an inch of it comes off, and then another inch. And so the period of time after the quote unquote rise of meeting, or after the closing of worship, is still very slow. There's a lot of space, a lot of silence. There's just a graduality to it. And there were a lot of people and committees involved in figuring out how to do that. The clerk and pastoral care committee took the lead, and the clerk has been, Penny Wright, the clerk of Hanover Meeting, has been instrumental in kind of holding that space, holding that container. And so after they do some introductions, they start with joys and concerns, or joys and sorrows, and then they have some announcements, and then they move after a time into breakout groups for discussion. And it's a very easy moment at the transition to breakout groups to slip out if you need to slip out. I'll talk about my own meeting, Beacon Hill, a little bit. Beacon Hill is like many meetings in New England that I've noticed, where meeting kind of just ends. Like worship ends, and it's hard to do introductions, so we don't do introductions. And occasionally there are announcements, but not always. And then what happens is some people have a conversation. Whoever feels like speaking has a conversation, and then people trickle out. And then when enough people have trickled out, the tech host ends the meeting. And so it's been a little bit less fellowshipy. It's been hard to get purchase on the soil and really have those kind of connections. And it works okay for people who are comfortable just starting a conversation in a Zoom meeting. And it really doesn't work so well for people who don't. Oh, this slide says questions for breakout groups, but of course we're in the breakout group. So I guess I could say this is questions for our breakout group. What is the relationship between the opportunities for worship and the opportunities for fellowship that your meeting creates? What is the why behind fellowship in your meeting? And what conversations about fellowship have cracked open or come to the surface in your meeting? And that's it for my slides. And I just want to say as well that if these aren't the questions that are coming to mind, but other questions are coming to mind, we can talk about those too. We have a good chunk of time. I think we have another about 35 minutes to talk. So I'm thinking maybe I don't need to call on people, but we can just have an open conversation. And unless it starts to get unruly, we can just go ahead and do that without raising hands or anything.
So we don't have a problem on Zoom with fellowship. It was before COVID with problems. We just didn't have fellowship. Now that we're on Zoom, fellowship is not a problem. I'm more concerned about fellowship after Zoom.
What's your fellowship like on Zoom?
Fellowship on Zoom. We have after worship. We have someone who calls out everybody's there and asks them to greet and give announcements. And people just don't just say hello, have a nice day. They go on and on and on with what they have to say, and then it strikes up a conversation. Then after a couple minutes of this conversation, it kind of stops. So then we call on the next person. The next person will just say hello and say what's on their mind, and there's follow-up questions, and that goes on for several minutes. And then we have 25 people, so our after worship is just as long as worship. And then people do gradually drop off after everybody had it after the rounds. People do gradually drop off. And then but yeah, so that hasn't been a problem. I'm more concerned about encouraging people to do that when they're face to face, or not just as necessary after worship, but being able to do friendly aids. Encourage, every now and then we talk about wanting to do friendly aids, and then we schedule it, and then no one shows up. Things or movie night. Oh, that's a great idea. Let's have movie night. We schedule movie night. No one shows up. So that's that. I think that's why I'm speaking with a tone of anger, because it's not anger so much, but it's frustration.
Yeah, I hear that.
At our meeting for worship, after the hour of silent worship, where sometimes we have people who bring a reading to the meeting, and that often kind of prompts people to do a little bit more vocal ministry than when we don't have a reading, but it's mostly silent worship. Then at the end, we go around the whole circle with joys and sorrows, and it's just a brief check-in with no conversation. You were talking about kind of conversation, just a brief check-in, and then we hold each other in the light between each person. And we do our meeting for worship by a telephone conference, and I'm the convener for that. So at the end, as people come in, I write down their names, and then at the end, I call out the names, and we go through the whole list, and then we have announcements, and then that's our regular worship. So that, and we've noted, people have commented that during COVID, people are doing a little bit more in-depth sharing there at the end than they were doing before. It's not just, hi, nice day, hi, good to see you, because we're going to stick around and eat and drink coffee. That's our only social connection. So we make a little bit better use of it than when we were going to stick around and all chat together. But I'm really looking forward to food and coffee. I'm a cook.
Yeah, Kathy, you speak my mind too. What you say about the reading reminds me that our meeting is small as it is not just a Sunday meeting for worship. We do have a midweek meeting that's somewhat programmed, which the model of which I got in when I was living in the Philadelphia area. It's called Holy Experiment. And it's evolved in Zoom times. It used to be once a month. Now it's every week. During the summer, or the what we call summer in Vermont, it's it's kind of not. It's actually nice. I don't know why people leave Vermont in the summer. But anyhow, we met outside. About 4 or 5 of us would meet there was a porch near the Capitol building that we would sit on. We could sit on it even in rain. But the main thing about this encounter is that I wouldn't have thought it if you told me, but it works so well. You actually separate silence and ministry. We have a period of silence, and this is prefaced. Okay, yeah, let me start at the beginning. As people come in, I usually facilitate. As people come in, I ask them how they are. I start some conversation. They come in one by one, a kind of mini check-in to the extent that people want to do that. That lasts about 10 minutes. And then we have 10 minutes, about half an hour of pure silence. And no indication that anybody is to share until after. If something comes up, you share after. We have a period of sharing, and there are some limits on this that are a little different from what we do in Meeting for Worship, because we're looking for authentic sharing. We're looking for sharing from our experience. We're not interested in theoretical lessons. And then another period, usually short, of silence, before which there is a reading. It's usually a poem or something. And I find people having those. We have actually 4 different ways of being with each other, and that seems to work very well. People get what they need who come, because there's kind of a way to connect for each of them, and so I like that. But I love regular Meeting for Worship. During non-Zoom times, it works pretty well. Our time after worship, if we ask people to share something, a lot of people don't. They just simply pass. People, I guess, are very private. I've only lived in New England for 7 years now, and people are very private. They don't seem to like to tell you that they mowed the lawn yesterday, much less something about how they feel. So I find them a little unfriendly, let's say. And with Zoom, it's terrible. It's painful. It's literally painful. If I only had my Meeting for Worship at my home meeting, I would be dead by now, probably. But fortunately, there are other Quaker contexts where people connect. And, these are committee meetings for the yearly meeting. And I'm in a little home group, which is a kind of faithfulness group. So I want to know how those of us who would like to share authentically can do so in the context of having a full Quaker meeting, but then time afterwards to do some. I hate small talk, not small talk, but real talking.
Thank you.
This is so painful to hear. This is this is poignant for me at this time. I did small talk makes me crazy. I'm not really interested, in that kind of stuff. And I'm from the Philadelphia area. I'm in Bucks County, so Philadelphia yearly meeting is what I'm a product of. I've only been a Quaker I'm convinced maybe 4 years. And Quakerism is so right for me. It is not a feel-good religion. There is the ocean of dark, there is the ocean of light. I love that. There's a reality about it that is just incredible. When I'm among friends and people want me to talk, and that's fine, but no, it's not. It's not anymore. They like it when I talk because apparently I'm passionate or whatever. But it's like standing on an abyss waiting for Godot. There's nothing coming back. And I'm beginning to find it now distressing. Listening to you all so far, I haven't heard all of you, but it is it's like you're playing on my piano and I'm so out of tune. It's hurting my ears. It's making me crazy. And I don't really have anything to contribute, but hearing you talk about fellowship, the first question when I came in, I waited. I didn't have the ability to get myself here, and I had to wait for my turn to get here. And when I looked, it said, "What is fellowship?" And the first thing that hit me is love. I love you. I want to be with you. I want to hear what you have to say. Tell me what's in your heart. I cannot know God until I know myself. To know myself, please tell me who you are. Please. And in Italian, it's like, the wind is blowing across this desert land and this grit is blowing in my face and nothing is happening. And I have brought this up don't let me talk too long, because this is,
We have time.
I'm like a crazy person about it. I've brought this up so many times with different groups, and I'm trying to attend as many as possible, because there just has to be an answer for me in here somewhere, and it's among you. And I don't know how to help myself gain accessibility to you. And it comes back to me, it's yours to speak. I don't want to do that anymore. I'm not talking. I'm talking to you. You've given me the right environment. This is unusual. The context of what you're about is not Quakerly common. And it's like, ooh, this is juicy. I want to go there. I want to be among you. And when this is over, I'm going to slam into deprivation again, I'm afraid. And Janet, it pisses me off, and I honestly, I don't know what to do with it. So here I am, and I'm going to listen, and I'm taking notes, trying to get it. So thank you so much. I sincerely hope I made some sense, and that I'm not like a crazy person, because some of the people at my meeting think, oh God, here she comes. So thank you.
I wish you were at our meeting.
I wish you were. I was going to say the same thing. Please come to us.
Yeah.
Give me your links. I'm coming.
Claire.
I am.
Could you put your email in the chat? I'll invite you.
Yeah, I'll
Yeah.
invite you too.
Oh my gosh. Oh, thank you. Yes, I'm doing it right now. I'm going
while
to do
you're,
it.
Cool.
yeah,
Thank you. I'm going to put
I-
myself on mute now because
uh-huh.
I'm going to go right into whimpering, but I'm going to give you my.
I just want to say that the image that came to me as I was listening to you was that the desire for connection and love and companionship that we all feel as humans is like, it's like sucking on a straw. And that, you know, in this time right now, when all we have is mostly is like Zoom or phone calls or what have you, it's like we're sucking on this incredibly thin straw. And no matter how hard we suck, it's just not, we're not getting the thing that we need. And I don't know what to do about that, but I just want to say, yes, 1,000 times, yes, that's what it feels like.
Mhm. We're used to thick chocolate shakes,
I know.
and we got those skinny little coffee stirrers.
Yeah, that's it. The coffee stirrers.
And you just can't get much.
Oh, no, let's see.
One other thing. Hearing you, I don't like it when I start crying, but this is so moving to me.
Okay.
Is such a blessing, such a relief. I really, there are times when a friend from my meeting said to me, yeah, not such a nice way, you're not Benjamin Lay. And I don't want to be Benjamin Lay. I don't want to change anybody. You know, I'm just looking for connection, and you have given me that. And I had no idea that this magic would happen with you. Very grateful. Thank you very much.
I'll just offer maybe that we take a couple of minutes to see if any more responses or reflections to what Claire has mentioned rise up.
Mhm. At the Flagstaff meeting, we sort of took a quick little poll, and it seemed like by about the middle of May, everybody will have been vaccinated and far enough away from the second vaccine to be immune. So we're thinking late May will be about the soonest that we can have fairly open meetings and have food. I'm the hospitality coordinator. Man, we have, yeah, we haven't had a chance to do that for a bit. So I've already proposed to the reopening committee that the first date that we're back together again, let me stage a garden party. Let's do it outside so we can do some spacing. And I'm a cook with all kinds of licensing and COVID training and blah, 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 blah. So I'll show you how to do this, how to do a party safely. So we won't have things where everybody puts their hands on it. It'll be in muffin paper cups, you know, various ways of having food that are safe for people who are still concerned about the ongoing pandemic. And then we can gather as a group in the garden. We happen to have a nice garden here at Flag. So I'm looking forward to doing that. And I even bought some tablecloths. But for outside, what you need is a twin bed fitted sheets. It'll fit over the tables and they won't try to fly away. Ha, it's already got them. Planning for fellowship and planning for how do we do it safely. That's, a few people who know what they're doing need to take the lead on that. And I'm the only one in the bunch who's a licensed cook with all the, every certificate they got. I'll take the lead on that. And I'm really looking forward to it. I've already got my list of little recipes. So,
I can really hear your excitement.
yes. Oh,
Yeah.
I love feeding people. That's my ministry. I don't do so well with words, but food, oh yeah, I do that.
Hey, sweetheart. Hi.
Ah,
Laura, I wanted to make sure and make some space for you to talk about what things have been like at your meeting.
Well, as a segue, I guess I can identify with Claire
mhm,
100%. When I first came to this meeting, there's no doubt we were welcomed and everybody is a really nice person and so forth, but I can't do small talk either. And I feel like if I ask questions, it feels like an inquisition. So I hesitate to do that. But over the years, I've made such incredible friends here now. And it's just it was very, very slow process. But now there's a small group of us that go hiking, which is great in pandemic times. We have a women's group that meets once a month where everything's confidential. And it's almost like worship sharing in the sense that we can speak freely and people can't interrupt us, can't give us advice, can't ask questions and all of that. We just are given space to speak confidentially. And at one time I was whining. I had this amazingly gorgeous dress made for my niece's wedding. And my husband definitely knew how much I had invested in this dress because I was going to the gym 5 and 6 days a week. So I would look incredible in this incredible dress. And come the wedding, not one person took a picture of me in my dress, including my expletive husband. So I was whining about this at a women's group. And one of them said, "We're having tea at my house on Thursday. Bring your dress." So I did. I modeled it. They took pictures. And I just felt so loved.
mhm.
And it was just such a spontaneous outpouring of love. So things like that have been happening. And it really, for me, I find it works with individuals, making cracks in individuals and small groups, because I can't navigate larger groups in a meaningful way. I can chat and I can be funny and whatever, but but in a meaningful way. So, so we've done these couple of things that have been very positive. We do share after meeting, which is also very, very meaningful. But I must be naive because I love Zoom worship. I feel that the worship can and does go very deep. And I have felt covered worships. And I guess if nobody else feels it, that's okay, because I do. And it's meaningful and very profound.
That reminds me of something that someone said earlier in the in the presentation today about how helpful it is that things change every 10, 15 minutes in a Zoom meeting, that like we're not always just sitting here and looking at the screen for the whole time. And what that can look like is semi-programmed worship instead of unprogrammed worship.
Yeah.
And a worship group that I'm involved with called Three Rivers has been experimenting with semi-programmed worship for pretty much the duration of the pandemic. And we meet on Thursday, every other Thursday morning. And we have basically 45 minutes that's divided up into a period of sort of welcoming, and then a prepared message that someone from the group creates in advance and brings, and a period of breakout rooms where we get into groups of 3 or 4 and pray for each other. People ask for what they want others to pray for, and then we pray for each other, and then we come back into the main group and have open unprogrammed worship for the rest of the time. And then things end promptly at 10:15, but people stay around and have conversation as they're able for a little while after that. And it has that quality of, we do something for a little while, and then we do a really different thing for a little while, and then we do yet a third different thing for a little while. And it really, I find it really keeps something flowing. I'm not sure what the something is, but it's flowing.
Yeah, some of the programmed meetings in our yearly meeting, we have both programmed and unprogrammed meetings in New York.
Right.
And
in New England.
they've been asking to have joint meetings so each can participate in the other's rituals, basically. I'd love to do that.
Who's been doing the asking? I'm really curious about this.
Mostly the unprogrammed meetings
So they've been asking program meetings to,
to have joint worship.
that's fantastic.
Yeah, isn't that cool? I don't know anybody at a programmed meeting. If I did, I would definitely be on the phone.
There are a handful of unprogrammed meetings in New England yearly meeting that are doing hybrid, and some are doing hybrid worship.
Mhm. We think we're going to stay with Zoom because so many people who are elderly and can't drive anymore have joined us, and new people have found us. We're not quite sure how, but they've found us, and their spirit is just lovely and wonderful, and we want to keep them. So we're going to be doing hybrid meetings after, even after we can fully open the meeting house.
What about other folks? What do you know about your meetings plans for that?
We're planning to get internet at the meeting house so that we can continue hybrid meetings after it's safe to be meeting in person all the time. Several of our members have moved away, but come to meeting by Zoom, and they've said, keep Zoom for us. And some of our members are having health problems, and so it's better for them to come by Zoom than in person. So we are taking steps to be able to do hybrid.
And you're presently doing Zoom now?
And we're actually, for worship, we're doing the telephone conference, and then Zoom for committee meetings and business meeting, that kind of stuff.
I got it. I'll say it. The Three Rivers Worship Group is only on Zoom, and we don't have a physical place. So we don't really know what we're going to do, but we're not too worried about the physical part yet. I mean, we're going to focus on the online worship for the foreseeable future, I think, just like we have been.
our meeting is planning on hybrid worship. In fact, we have had some practice with it last summer a little bit when the COVID cases, the number percentage was low. We actually did briefly open our meeting house for hybrid worship, and we still have some bugs to work out with our sound system, but otherwise people really enjoyed that. So we have plans to even after we open the meeting house permanently, have hybrid worship. Again, it's partly because we actually did, as Laura said to me, it's people found us, they joined us after Zoom. That's the only way they understand Quaker worship is by Zoom. So, and we also had friends that had moved away. So we're getting people from Switzerland and Florida and that had moved away. They're joining us by Zoom. So we want to be able to stay in touch with these people. And we had some people who are uncomfortable with Zoom. But then when we went to the hybrid, they did come and worship with us. So we're looking forward to being able to accommodate people who are comfortable with the technology and people who are not comfortable with the technology. And with our building, it's a very old building with the very high ceiling. So the sound system, we're having issues with trying to figure out a sound system that doesn't make horrible noise from the meeting room. But yeah, so we've reorganized our furniture to accommodate the camera in the meeting room. So we're very excited about going forward. Zoom has been in many ways a blessing for us.
Yeah. Yep.
I think I've heard a lot of people talk about how much they appreciate not having to drive to committee meetings or to meeting for worship. And I've heard a lot of people talk about the joys of being able to visit many different meetings all over the country and the world. And I've even heard or read about Emily Province has a blog with a recent post about what she calls, it's called Fruit Basket Upset and the Eighth Continent. And she's basically talking about how the internet is a place. It's like the eighth continent, and people go there and they do stuff there like worship. And now that that place exists, it's kind of like we can't go back to not having that place anymore. And she really calls into question the whole idea of worshiping in a geographic place, because once we have so many meetings doing online or hybrid worship, why be part of one meeting versus another? It may or may not be the right thing for you to go to the meeting that's geographically closest. And for some folks, there's only one meeting nearby that's, or sometimes even zero meetings nearby that they can go to physically. But there's literally dozens and dozens of meetings that they can attend online.
I want to say a word for community, and I do understand that there's diversity in this among folks, that I, for one, cannot exist very long if I don't touch someone. And I've existed somehow for 13 months, hardly touching anybody. In fact, I realized my deficit once I was in the supermarket where you keep 6 people 6 feet apart. And somehow or another, I bumped into someone. I actually bumped into a person. And it was as though an electric shock had gone through my whole body. I was so startled by the sensation. And, you know, and I said, excuse me, you know, I've done something bad because of social distancing and so forth. But even more than that, I just realized what a different kind of being I've become. And it's not nice. I don't like the kind of being I've become. And I think for me, you know, and maybe it's a third of the population or something, you know, has to do with perceptual styles or something. For me, I can't really sense you unless I have that common near physical space. Our atoms are interchanging, electric currents are going between us, smells are there. That, I mean, I couldn't say to you what it does for me, but somehow it enters my brain and gives me a sense of connection that's, I mean, it is it's an emotional thing. It's not a spiritual thing, because I've been in covered worship via Zoom too. It exists, and I in fact, most every morning in Pendle Hill worship, I experience it.
Wow.
But there's as a human being, I need to touch you, and that's community, and that's part of who I am and who I want my religious community to be. So yeah, I love visiting other meetings, but I want a home meeting where I can touch you.
I can see myself getting back into the regular physical meetings as soon as it's safe to do so, as soon as our meeting opens up, and really, really enjoying it, just like you were saying, LVM, that's important stuff. But business meetings and committee meetings, let's do those by Zoom so we don't have to commute.
It's
Friends,
better
we've come
for
to the
carbon footprint too.
Yes, it is.
yes. We've come to the end of our time, and in the remaining 22 seconds, I just want to say I am so grateful that you all came to this breakout group, and that you brought your whole selves, and that we got somewhere, you know,
Yeah.
and didn't
Thank
just
you.
stay on the surface. So thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Lovely to meet you all.
Let's go deeper. Oh, I think this is our facilitator.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hi.
We'll give people a couple more minutes to join us. Does anyone happen to know what happens after this next round of roundtables?
I forget. I think there's some kind of just summarizing. When does it end?
I'm
Because
not sure.
I had two different times.
What are the times you have?
I had that it ended at 4, and then
Uh-huh.
I had that it ended at 5. So I'm not sure.
Okay.
Maybe
I'm not
it's
sure
4
either.
one time zone, but I'm in Eastern time zone, so. And if these are 45 minutes, that would take us till 3:45. I don't remember what's
Okay.
after that.
Yeah, me neither.
I had a whole script because I was the person pasting stuff in the chat this morning, but I haven't looked at it for the afternoon.
Oh, do you have the spreadsheet?
Yes, I do.
I bet it says on the spreadsheet.
Well, let me see if I can go find it. I closed it because well, it says at 3:45 this group is done. Then we have and there's a little bit of thank you and resources in the chat. Then there's at 4 is worship. And then at 4:30, we welcome you to type a highlight from today in the chat, and then they end it.
Okay, so it's,
So I guess really
it's
about
somewhere in
4:30.
between 4 and 5.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, I'm starting to get the feeling that this might be it, which is lovely. And I'll just kick us off by saying welcome. Thank you for coming. I'd like to do a quick round of introductions. I'm David Coletta. I use he, him pronouns. I'm from New England Yearly Meeting. I'm a member at Friends Meeting at Cambridge, and I'm one of the hosts of a small worship group called 3 Rivers, where we've been doing online only semi-programmed worship for the duration of the pandemic. And I'm also working out of a leading to help Quakers figure out how to do online business and other kinds of gatherings. And I'll pass it to Karen.
Karen Cunningham. I'm from Annapolis Friends Meeting. I'm assistant clerk there and clerk of what we are calling our Path Forward Committee. So I think maybe it was last spring, our clerk, asked a small handful of us to serve because we knew that some people wanted to get back in the meeting house soon. Some people thought we should be meeting outside. Some people, within a month, we got on Zoom, and some people are just loving that. So has slowly, incrementally, brought things to business meeting about small groups outside or small groups inside. So that's my interest today is, we've been taking small steps, but we're prepared to take some bigger steps soon. But we have a real concern for maintaining community. Like that's sort of our guiding light, that whatever we do, we want to maintain our connections in our community. So.
Welcome, Patsy. We're just going around and doing introductions.
Thanks, David.
Would you like to go?
Sure. I'm Patsy Arnold Martin. I'm in Bedford, Virginia, member of Roanoke Friends Meeting and Baltimore Yearly Meeting.
Welcome. And if you want to say just a couple words about what brought you to this group.
I just like to have fun.
All right.
Seriously, I've organized several parties for our meeting this year. We had a really fun Christmas party and just always looking for other ideas to bring people together. We found that those events, people who have resistance to Zoom for worship show up.
Interesting.
And I've had one of them say to me, I can't worship sitting looking at a screen, but I like to see other people in the meeting. So
thank you. Lynn, why don't you go ahead?
So I'm Lynn Pearsall. I'm a member of Swarthmore Meeting. It's part of Philadelphia Yearly Meeting, but I also serve Friends as a coordinator for 8 other meetings in Concord Quarter, a different quarterly meeting than the one I'm in. So I've watched over the last year meetings do different things for fellowship and fun, and some things went well and some things didn't. And as a quarter coordinator, we had events that were in person before that we couldn't have. So we tried to have some things that were online, and they just, it was hard. But like Patsy was saying, at my meeting, we had a game night for New Year's Eve, which was a tradition that we had an in-person game early evening night that was very intergenerational. And we did it again this year, and it worked really well. It was a lot of fun. Families came. It was like the only time we saw children all year, really. So I'm just looking for like other ideas to share, both with my own meeting and the meetings I work for. But I'm only going to be with the coordinator job for like another 5 weeks because I'm retiring. But whatever I can share with them as I transition out, I would like to do.
Well, I hear among everybody's introductions kind of a desire for ideas about ways to continue to hold and build community, starting now and continuing as we, make our way forward, whatever that is. And I have a whole presentation that doesn't actually address that, so I'm going to just sort of set it aside, and maybe we'll come back to it if we feel like it. But I'd love to just spend a little time exchanging ideas. If anyone wants to tell a story of something that worked really well for fellowship in their meeting in the last year.
Well, maybe I'll share something that I think would work well in a meeting, but in the summer maybe. And I got this idea. I got a lot of information from actually a meeting in New England yearly meeting. It was Portland meeting, and I found out that they were doing lots of fun events, like sort of arts and spirituality kinds of things. And so I was linked up with somebody there. And we did we call it an Everyone's Got Talent event last summer for the quarter, for Concord Quarter. And we did have an event and people enjoyed it, but it was a very small attendance. One of the things we discovered, and Portland had warned us of this, is that you needed to really invite people. If you were in person, it just felt easier to do it. Like in my meeting, like lots of people would want to share. So it was like pulling teeth to do it in a quarter across, actually 2 quarters. We did it in collaboration with another one. So I wouldn't really recommend something like that unless it's in your own meeting and everybody knows each other, because there's a certain amount of risk in sharing your art or even though everybody's so supportive. I mean, but that was something that was, I would say, mixed. I think people really appreciated that we did that effort. And we did it in my meeting in February, the same sort of thing. And we had more participation in my meeting than we had from across 2 quarters last summer. So the thing we missed was children. We didn't get any families with children because they were just zoomed out. So.
Actually, that makes me, oh, go ahead, Patsy.
I was just gonna say, I could share some ideas.
Yeah.
We've had a number of birthday parties through the year, not necessarily with my meeting, but with my family. And we've learned a few things about doing that it really helps to have sort of, as Peterson Toscana was saying this morning, have some things that people watch together and then react to, that really kind of helps bring people together. And having an MC to either call on people, or what we've been doing in our meeting for our coffee hour is, as a tech person, I number everybody as they come into the meeting. So you know where you sit in the circle. So nobody has to call on you. You just go in numerical order. And that has made it so people don't talk over each other and then get shy and that kind of awkward thing that happens. We also found that doing games with spinners, you can get online spinners, and that those make it really fun, because you don't know who's going to have to, everybody knows what the questions are, but you don't know who's going to be called on or who's going to get which question. And so that's been a fun thing to do.
I want to also talk about talent shows, because I think talent shows are great. And they're not only great for the participants, but they're also great for the tech people. I've hosted a bunch of talent shows in the past year One of them was at yearly meeting sessions, our New England yearly meeting sessions last summer. And we had a bunch of kids. And that was really just like the talent show that we have in person, except like people were actually in some ways more creative. Like there were a couple of kids who as a kid and their parent who worked up an act that involved them being in two different places, but throwing stuff back and forth between their screens as if they were like in the same place. And it was so cool and so hilarious. And I also hosted a talent show for Cambridge meeting and a couple of talent shows at the Friends World Committee for Consultation section of the Americas conference last month, and also a talent show portion of a celebration of love between a couple at Cambridge meeting. And in all these cases, not only was the material really engaging for everybody, like everybody likes to hear people sing and perform, but as the tech host, it gave me an opportunity to do creative things with Zoom that I don't usually get to do in Meeting for Worship and in Meeting for Business. The opportunities to do creative things are very limited. But in a talent show, I can do things like spotlight different people, or I can put lyrics up for songs, or I can play music in the background. Oh, there's another talent show I did too. That's been some of the most fun stuff I've done. And, you know, not everybody who tech hosts is as into it as I am, but I'm really into it. And so I'm always looking for ways to make it new and fresh as the person like behind the scenes running the controls. And I hope there are other people at other meetings who are like that, who like to dig into that portion of it. Other ideas about?
If I could
could
tag
also-
on to the talent show,
Yeah.
last summer at the Fringe General Conference Junior Gathering talent show, a girl came with her horse and did horseback riding routines that she'd been preparing for a show. And, you know, everybody could see it and it was amazing.
Right. And you couldn't have that in person. I was going to share about the game night that we did on New Year's Eve at my meeting. And that I thought one of the really nice things was that it was done with breakout rooms with different comfort levels of technology. So there's these Jackbox games that are online that you pay for. So there was one room that was those, and with a young adult like facilitating us through it. And then there was another one where it was actually a regular board game that people just adapted to do. It's called Balderdash, and it's like about words, made up words. You have to decide if a word's made up or it's a real word. And each person just took a turn picking a word out of the dictionary because not everybody had the game. And then I think the third one was something else, some way of doing it. But it meant you could move back and forth like you can in breakout rooms if you were tired of one game. And it worked really well. And, you know, the kids could help explain some of the games because some of us weren't familiar with them. So it worked well, especially having those different levels of technology involved in the different breakout rooms.
I have a question about the breakout rooms. I love them. One thing I don't like is trying to socialize over a large group of people on Zoom. So what size have you found optimal in like a social gathering, whether it's games or some fellowship? Like, what size breakout room have you aimed for? Any thoughts on that?
I have some thoughts. At Three Rivers, when we go into breakout rooms for sharing and prayer, 3 to 4 is what we aim for. And the rationale behind that is that we offer, first of all, a very limited amount of time. We actually offer like 8 or 9 minutes for this. So more than 4 people, it starts to become very difficult for anybody to really share very much. But fewer than 3, like if you aim for 3 and you only get 2, that's a really small group, too small maybe. And if you aim for 2 and you might only get 1, because not everybody always goes into the breakout room. So like there's that sweet spot right around 4, I think. The other thought is that for breakout rooms in which there's a fixed amount of time, it's really helpful to try to have the breakout groups have the same number of people as each other. And that's difficult because you can't predict whether people will actually make it to the breakout room or not. One thing that is worth considering, I can go on for a really long time, so stop me, but another thing that's really important to consider is there's an option to either invite people to breakout rooms, which they can accept or decline, or to automatically sweep them into breakout rooms. And the advantages of inviting people and then they may accept or decline are that some people may not want to go into a small group. And if they don't have the option, then they have to go into the group and then leave. And that's, maybe not so beautiful. But the advantage of sweeping them in and sweeping them back out is, first of all, it's much faster and it's much less work for the tech host because they don't have to help anybody who has trouble accepting the invitation. And so it's great for folks who are like pretty competent at showing up at a Zoom meeting, but not necessarily so good at figuring out how to get into a breakout room. And then the other consideration besides size, I think, is how to end the breakout group. And again, the automatic closing of the room is really helpful because it keeps the program on time. And it's also really hard on a group to interrupt a conversation in mid-word. It's not a thing we would ever do as Quakers, except for the fact that it facilitates getting people back to the main session so well. So a consideration is, do you want to end the breakout rooms automatically at a certain time, or leave them open and let people return on their own schedule, which may mean that people trickle back to the main session instead of all coming back at the same time. And that's just a question about like what kind of feel you want to have. And then I guess I'd say one more thing, which is that you probably noticed that we're trying to use this feature where people can select their own breakout rooms, and it has a lot of promise, but it doesn't yet work quite as smoothly as making the tech host do it. And also it doesn't work in older versions of Zoom. So that's one of the reasons that there were all these emails asking us to upgrade to the latest version of Zoom before today's event. That's where I stand, but I'm really curious what other people think about breakout room sizes.
I've been doing breakout rooms about twice a week with the Pendle Hill Worship. On Wednesday mornings and Saturday mornings, there's worship sharing, and they aim for 3 to 4 people, but there are a number of couples and even a couple of families that share a screen. And they're aiming for 4, but you might get 7 or 9 if there's multiple people on the screen. And so that can be kind of tricky. But lately they have been telling us it was going to end at one point and then actually leaving rooms open 2 minutes longer. So they say officially this meeting is going to end at 3:30, but we're not going to close the room till 3:32. So if you need to finish your thought.
That's great.
So can I ask, because I've experienced that, but then the bigger session is essentially waiting on everybody. It's like when we're in person and they say, okay, bathroom break, be back at 2. And the clerk's like, yeah, actually we're going to start at 2:05. I said 2, but it's really 2:05. So what do you do to amuse the people who actually, ended on time? Or do you just send them off to get a drink of water? Because if people, you know, legitimately are given the option of finishing their thought, then you don't want them to miss whatever's happening next.
I don't,
What's that?
yeah, my understanding is like if you are going to end it and you give people 2 more minutes, it's for all the groups. I don't think you can give one breakout group more time than the others. And I've never been anywhere where anybody couldn't fill up any extra time that they had. But if you let them close themselves and leave, then you do end up, as David said, with people dribbling back in and waiting for one group that's not done yet, who wasn't probably paying attention to the time because they got so interested in, you know, communicating with each other. So I've noticed, you know, they'll say you have this much time, and then we actually had more time.
Mhm.
And I think that's probably a good strategy, although on some level, it doesn't feel quite honest. So, but
Old integrity testimony rearing its
I
head.
know, it's just like, so they said one thing, but they're doing another. And I understand totally, you know, because human beings are the way they are, and they just don't always, myself included, pay attention to how much time they're taking or not taking.
I really appreciate when I've been in groups and they actually tell you to assign a timekeeper. And that really helps, especially if you have, you know, 4 people and you have 10 minutes and each person's supposed to have, you know, 2.5 minutes or whatever. It really helps to have somebody kind of nudge people along.
Karen, I'm really intrigued by your question. And I've been sitting here thinking about what that is, that moment when there's a room full of people waiting to start, and there's a few people still in the breakout room who haven't come back yet. And I think that friends are uniquely gifted with tools to handle that situation because we worship in silence. And so that silence, like, what's the problem with that? And I think to myself that more than anything else, the problem is people wondering what's going on. What are we doing now? That lack of clarity about what we're doing in that moment while we're waiting. And so it makes me think that there's nothing wrong with that time as long as we're clear about what it is. And so that makes me think that we could say at the beginning, I'm kind of just riffing here, but we could say at the beginning of the breakout rooms before people leave, folks will be coming back in dribs and drabs or will be trickling back in. If you are among the earlier of folks to come in, please hold the meeting in worship while we wait for everyone else. And then you set an expectation about what we're doing with that time. And that's only one possible expectation. You could also say, while we're waiting, tell us a story. Or, you know, like it could be anything. But I don't think the discomfort is in the trickling back. I think the discomfort is just not knowing what we're doing.
I like that a lot. Thank you. I think you nailed it.
Good. Good.
So I have another question.
Yeah.
We have a couple of spiritual friendship groups that are great fellowship. And one though started during the pandemic and it's this hybrid meeting, which is a challenge. A couple of people in person outside of the meeting house, masked and distanced, and like 3 people online. So so what's my question? So it's been hard to figure out for the group to really coalesce about what we're supposed to be doing. The woman convening it isn't very experienced. I'm busy with tech and frankly didn't agree to convene this group. I agreed to participate. So any tips for navigating some of the delicacy of well, this is what I think we're doing. Oh, you think we're doing something different. Like some of that happens better in person because you've got the body language. But, and we also find that people who get frustrated can just drop off of Zoom, and it's not nearly as obvious as walking out of a room. So any other experience with sort of navigating tricky situations where it's not business meeting, it's not meeting for worship, it's not these usual things that we do, it's like this smaller group thing? It's not a very solid question.
I mean, I don't have that exact experience, but it just seems to me, and maybe I'm missing something, that it would be, you're seeing this in this group. It would be nice to see if others were feeling that as well, and just have a part of a time when you get together to talk about that, just to share, you know, what the group means to them, or, you know, what they're getting out of it, or what they'd like to see happen, or, you know, that kind of thing, just so it's out in the air. And it is hard because you've got two people in person who can see all their body language and everything, and then three other people where you see them like we are, you know, from the neck up, and maybe with good light, maybe not, as they were saying this morning.
Right.
But to just raise it so it's not like the elephant in the room or the elephant out in the meeting yard or whatever.
That reminds me of, we have two spiritual faithfulness groups that started this year on Zoom. And the format for those allows a 5-minute evaluation period at the end before closing, where you ask questions like, how well have we listened to each other? How well have we stayed to the time frame that we set up? And having that type of time for evaluation might help address some of those things.
Yeah, that reminds me that a group that I'm in does the same thing, where we meet for an hour and we explicitly reserve the last 5 minutes for people to check in about how the group was today. And so you kind of know that that's coming. You get to expect that that's part of the structure. And Karen, I was trying to gain purchase on your question, and I'm not sure I did. But the part about it that resonated for me was the question of, how do people know what we're doing at any given time in a meeting? And that often not knowing what we're doing at a given time can really cause a lot of confusion or just kind of disjointedness in a meeting. And it occurred to me that, of course, this is not a problem unique to online or hybrid, but it happens all the time in person as well. And I'm thinking about business meeting, and I'm thinking about how one of the things that a really confident and active clerk is doing all the time in a business meeting is kind of saying back where we are in this particular minute. Here's what I'm hearing from friends right now. Let me try a sense of the meeting, and so on. And it occurs to me that that's a gift to an online meeting as well, is for someone, ideally the convener, but maybe it doesn't have to be the convener, to be kind of calling that stuff out. And all the more importantly, because we are so much limited in an online meeting to like words and pictures, and we have so little in the way of body language that we can really exchange compared to when we're in person.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Not sure I'm actually modeling this as our facilitator. I haven't really been doing that. So it's a little bit of a admonition to myself. So where we are right now, let's see, we have about 10 to 15 more minutes. And it seems like we've moved into sharing our questions with each other and responding to each other's questions, which It's very different from what we did in the first session, but it's lovely. And I'm wondering if there are more questions.
I was just wondering
Go
what about what you had planned on presenting.
Well, I'm happy to share it with you if you'd like.
Only if the others want to too.
I like that.
Okay. I will share my screen in a moment. And before I start, I'll just say that this is actually a presentation that I adapted from something that I did at an event for our yearly meeting a month or two ago on fellowship, and it seemed like it was a good fit. But it's a much different way of coming at the topic. It's a much more sort of intellectual and abstract way, which reflects me and who I am. So with that caveat, like I get it that this may or may not resonate for anybody else, but here we go. So this is just a little presentation about what is fellowship and how it fits into the other things that we do. So I want to introduce a cast of characters with these little shapes: meeting for worship, clearness committees, meeting for business, faithfulness groups. And we don't really think of these things as fellowship. We think of fellowship as maybe around the edges, like maybe as we're sitting down for a group, we'll do something to kind of connect with each other, or maybe at the rise of meeting. But fellowship is kind of this thing that surrounds the specific events that we do, permeates them. It's kind of like the Force in Star Wars. And I want to put the things that we do on this kind of graph here, and where over to the right, the expectations are the clearest and most specific, and over to the left, the expectations are the fewest and the least specific. And as we go up to the top, the goals of the activity are the most specific, and at the bottom, it's not so much goal oriented at all. It's just whatever happens is what we wanted to happen. We wanted something to emerge spontaneously or organically. Now, it might not be a surprise to you that when I make this graph, I put meeting for business in the upper right section here. And this is just where I put things. It's a fun game to play, like, where do you put these things? Meeting for business has the most specific expectations, the most specific goals, the most structure, and fits really well in that sort of upper right corner. Things like committee meetings, smaller groups, affinity groups, faithfulness groups are somewhere in the middle in both dimensions. So expectations are less clear, but still there's some, like at a clearness committee, we know how it's different from a faithfulness group or faith or a pastoral care committee or whatever. And similarly, the goals might be more specific, or they might be a little less specific. Like in a faithfulness group, the goals may not be quite as cut and dried, but still there's some clarity about those things. And then meeting for worship is really starting to head in that lower left corner. Like, we have this concept of an hour, and we have this concept of really checking with your inner guide about whether to speak or not. But other than those things, it's really very much about what emerges that day. And then I put fellowship all the way over in the lower left corner. It's kind of the opposite of it's the anti-business. The expectations are the fewest, the goals are the least clear. And then we come to kind of this problem that we've been faced with the last year, which is that this upper right corner is what Zoom was designed for. It was designed for business teleconferences, which look a lot like Quaker Meeting for Business. And as you kind of move down into the left, you leave the zone of what Zoom is best at. And so we use Zoom as Quakers in ways that it wasn't designed for at all. We really stretch what Zoom is capable of doing to the limit. And this has the effect of, it's kind of like a giant sucking sound. It's kind of like a wind blowing that kind of pushes all the activities that we do up and to the right. It causes us to try to make these things more like what Zoom was designed for. And that's, I think, a force that we should resist, that it is good order for us to resist. Not always, but at least some of the time. And so the alternative way to look at these things is that this is like a zone of creativity for us as friends, that all the things that we try to do that are not in the sweet spot of what Zoom was designed for, we just have to be really creative in how we try to do them, either on Zoom or with other tools. So that's my thing. And it's a way of sort of structuring the thinking around the activities that we do, and a way of reminding us that we are trying to make do with tools that we would never have chosen if there were better choices, but this is really kind of the only game in town. Actually, is it? I'm curious whether anyone in their meetings has used anything else.
I haven't used anything else in my meeting, but in committee meetings, we used Google Meet, and with much less success, the Microsoft version. I forget what
Teams.
it's. Teams, yeah.
Yeah, and those tools really aren't any different. They're still designed for the same things that Zoom was designed for, and not designed for the same things that Zoom was not designed for.
One of the things we've used at work is Mural.
Oh,
Anybody's used that.
no.
But it's a way you have virtual sticky notes, and you can have activities and draw people to a certain part of the board, and they fill out their sticky notes, or they vote on things. Or
Did you call it? Is it MIRO? Muro?
Mural, as MURAL.
Oh, there's another thing called Miro, MIRO, which does just what you said.
Yeah. Well, like I think it would be a fun activity. It's a great way of people sharing all at once, and then you go through and you read and you can organize them. But just the idea of trying to introduce that technology to people in the meeting.
Absolutely.
And even figure out Zoom. So the one thing about Zoom, we all use it because not everyone gets it, but it's the easiest thing for people to try to get.
Yeah. One, I've never done this, but I've been to a couple of gatherings where they used, I don't even know what it was called, but it's like a webbing thing where you write, something shows up on your screen and you write in the answer to a question, like where you live or something. And then on the screen, it builds this whole web of like where people live, or what it could be a query about what you think community is. And then you get all this word web up there, which is kind of cool to see. But I don't know what that's called.
It sounds really cool.
Yeah, we use that too. And
I was at a baby shower that was online, and they did that. They used that.
Well, if anyone remembers what it's called, then I'd love to.
Did you go in on Zoom to the baby shower, or did you go in on something else?
No, we went in on Zoom to the baby shower, but you were also supposed to have a smart device that was logged into something else.
Oh, okay.
And so you had your phone, and then when they asked you, a lot of it was online things. When they asked you a question, you filled it out on your phone, and then it would pop up on the screen in whatever format they were putting things together. So it did mean having two devices.
Right.
And I had seen that happen, I think, at a yearly meeting session, some kind of.
We did something like that where people put their answers in chat, and then someone else one of the co-hosts put all of that into a word cloud and then
Yeah.
threw it back up. But that was, you know, a different way of doing something like that.
Yeah, that way you could do it when people wouldn't have to have a separate device. But it might have been the same program.
I love this. The one thing I can offer here is at the FWCC section of the Americas meeting last month, for social time, everybody was invited to get off of Zoom and go on to another application called Gather.town. Gather.town was the name of it. And the way this works is somebody designs kind of like a space with couches and chairs and furniture and what have you. And then each person who shows up as a little like avatar that they can move around on the screen with their arrow keys. And in Zoom, creating breakout rooms is kind of heavyweight. It's like somebody has to do a lot of work. But in this kind of tool, all you have to do is get near somebody and boom, you're in a breakout room together. And what that really means is when you get near somebody, you can start talking with them and you see their picture and they see your picture. And then when you go away from them, you don't anymore. So it's much more like the kind of social hour at the Rise of Meeting, in good ways and in not so great ways. So like some people say, oh, I really don't like that tool because it makes me feel like I'm back in middle school where all the cool kids are over there and I'm over here. And so that was like a little bit surprising, but people do like playing with stuff. So I get that thing about, well, we are barely able to use one tool, let alone two. But at the same time, if it's fun enough, people will overcome their resistance.
That's a great idea. One of our offices did that as an office party, except their facilities people had like pictures of the actual space. And somebody said they hadn't been in the office. They just went and sat in their office, their own office by themselves for a while, and then went out and found somebody in the kitchen.
I love that.
Yeah. I wonder if it would be possible to take pictures of a meeting house, you know, the foyer, the kitchen, or
a floor plan. You could do a floor plan maybe.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. You could just take a floor plan and plop it on there, and that could easily work.
I'm anxious to hear about your calming pajama party.
Oh, you know about that, huh? So
it was mentioned in our earlier roundtable.
Yeah. Well, one of the offerings of Three Rivers Worship Group is something called the Calming Pajama Party. And my friend Emily Savin and I are the co-hosts of the Calming Pajama Party, which is held every Sunday through Thursday evening from 9:30 p.m. to 10:10 p.m. and consists of kind of gathering and centering, a body scan, prayers and gratitudes, and a bedtime story. And the purpose is very specifically to help each other settle down for sleep. Because one of the things about being on screens all day is that at night, you just like, how do you know when to stop? Mm-hmm. And I love it. I joined it as a participant last March, and then I became the co-host last May. And I'll just put, if anyone is interested, I'll just put the link in the chat here.
Oh yeah, do.
Something similar I participated in last spring a lot, and